what's up, y'all? It's your boy Chance, and before I get into this video, I just want to say thank you, y'all. Like, I really love y'all. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate every one of you. If you're watching this, we just hit I was about to say 1 million. Chill, relax. We just hit 1K subs, baby. We just hit 1K subs. Hey, listen, got something very special for y'all today. We have a tutorial, right? So today's tutorial is how to get that chxnceNB, you know what I'm saying? That pluggnb, that softnb sound. That's a lot more popular nowadays. So yeah, first things first, what you're gonna need, purity, expand, all those types of plugins. Definitely, I would say purity is almost like required. Like, definitely gonna need purity or expand or both. I use both. And then everything else is just kind of optional, right? And then for the drums, you're definitely gonna need a drum kit. And I have a drum kit, I'll link it down below. Or you can get another free drum kit, doesn't matter. But yeah, let's hop right into it. First things first is the keys. Always start with the melody, always start with the chord progression, because that is the foundation. That's what everything lays on, right? Because it's weird if you start with the drums, or it's weird if you start with the leads or something else, right? So definitely start with the chord progression first, and then add your top melodies as needed, right? So first things first, I'm going to show you what keys I use. So this is the first impression preset, right? And what I did was I lowered the piano a little bit in the mixer, and then I increased the FMEP volume a little bit, right? And so this is the first thing that I started, right? This is my foundation. This is what I started with. So I started with this, and then of course I built upon it. So the next thing I added was I layered it with some time keys from Pearson's Platinum, which this is 100% free. It's on gospelmusicians.com. You can get it yourself. And then this is what this sounds like. Then once again, I added another layer, and I added some breathy keys from, it's like these breathy sounding keys from Expand. So this is what it sounds like. And then finally, I added some Rhodes. So this is from the Scarby Mark I, and it's from Native Instruments. And so this is what it sounds like. And then the last thing I added for the layer wise is I added a pad, and this is the OB8 preset in the slow synth category in purity. And then if I play all of these, like kind of these layers together, just like the keys, it gives it this full, rich sound, which is something that you'll hear a lot in my music, is that it's the sound is very full, rich, it's very thick, right? So this is what it sounds like all together. And so the reason I do that is I kind of want to cover a couple spaces of sound, right? So I want to cover the high end, right? Which is kind of why I have something like this, right? It kind of covers the higher end frequencies, right? And then I have something like the Rhodes, right? Which covers a little bit of more the middle, right? And of course the pad, which covers a little bit of the low end, not too much, but more of like the low mids, right? And then when you combine them all together, it creates like a nice, like a full sound, right? Alright, so next thing I added was a string, and it's from Purity, under the string category, V, A, and A strings too, right? And this is what it sounds like. And I always add like one of these back strings, like just like a high note string, right? And it just adds like this atmosphere kind of sound to it. It kind of just fills that space. And so the next thing I added was, for the melody, was a spiccato string from X-Band, right? Spiccato strings down, spiccato down. And this is what it sounds like. So I'm gonna go in here. So when you make your spiccato strings, and I always add like these spiccato strings in my sound because it just adds like a orchestral, this very like almost majestical kind of sound to it. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I'm not explaining it the best, but it adds like a really nice sound to it. So when you're making these, if you're gonna use spiccato strings or pizzicato strings, always keep in mind that don't do too much, right? Like I'm doing a little bit here. This is usually, I don't usually do this one, but it's consistent melody, right? It's like a da da da. Like it always is kind of coming back to that one note, so it's very consistent and it doesn't do too much, but it does add a little bit of nuance and switches up here and there, right? And so the reason I say don't do too much is just mainly because you want to leave that for your leads. You want to leave the nuance and you want to leave all the cool stuff for your leads, right? For your synth leads. And you don't want to do, you just kind of leave this more foundational. Like all of these are just foundational melodies, right? So you don't want to go too out of bounds, but it's not like you can't, right? Because it might sound good, right? But as far as my style, I just kind of keep it simple, right? So next thing is the nylon string guitar, which is Impurity, under the normal category, right? And this is what it sounds like. So one thing to keep in mind when you're making nylon guitar melodies, and I always include like a nylon guitar melody because I really love the sound of it, and it just adds like a natural, like a vibe, like an old school, like it really puts the NB in pluggnb, right? Because it's got that natural guitar sound, right? So when you're making these, this is kind of like an oddball, right? In the melody kind of section of the song, like it's kind of the opposite with the spiccato strings. Like you actually want to take creative liberty. You want to take risks, quote unquote, with this, right? Like go crazy with it. Like kind of come up with something that's kind of, you know, unique, sounds good, is catchy, right? Almost like a lead. Almost. It's basically like you could treat this as a lead and really go crazy with it. But one thing I will show you, right, is with my melodies. So these notes right here, if you notice a lot of my music, I use these notes no matter what key it's in. I always kind of use a note that sounds like this. Like it's, excuse my singing, but like that type of note, I use that a lot. Like if you notice in my songs, it sounds similar because I'll use that same kind of notes, those same kind of arrangement of notes in other songs, in other types of melodies, right? And that's just a personal thing that I just like those notes. I like how those notes sound with the chords, right? Like those notes right there, like this one, and then this one. Like if you notice, I use that a lot. You don't have to, but it's just my style. I use those notes a lot, and it just sounds, I don't know. I just really like how it sounds, so I use it a lot. I probably shouldn't, right? I probably should switch up, right? But yeah, moving on to the next thing is the bells. And I always add bells. And these bells are the same feel from, where is it? From the bell and perk category right there. So this is what it sounds like. So first things first, this same feel 1 and 2, vibe stick 1 and 2, which are down here, probably the best bells out of all the other bells. I would just keep it in a stack with y'all. I really like how these bells sound. Vibe stick 1 and 2 has a more harsh sound, so I use same feel 1 and 2 more often, but they sound really good. As far as the bell and the pattern and the arrangement, keep the bells simple, kind of how the spiccato. Don't do too much, but have like little hits and little grace notes here and there to kind of spice up the melody. As you can see, it's pretty simple. It's not too much, but yeah. And then lastly, I would like to say about the piano midis, right? when you're making the piano midis, right? Like those little grace notes here and there, keep it consistent. Same thing, keep it consistent. Don't do too much, but do enough to where it sounds interesting, if that makes sense, and catchy, right? Because catchiness is really key with pluggnb, in my opinion, because since you have a lot of ear candy that's kind of stacked on top of each other, you want to be careful on what ear candy you're using and where it's being placed in the sequence, because over saturating, doing too much ear candy, too much movement can sometimes take away from the beat itself. So make sure to really take your time with it and don't do too much, but add something that sounds good and catchy, right? So overall, right, we have all these sounds, and it's important to think about layering, right, when you're thinking about the bigger picture, because when you layer properly, it really adds like a nice sound, like a nice full rich sound. And so I'm gonna play all of this together. Sounds really good, and I really like this melody a lot. So now we're gonna move on to the leads. So the leads for this one is, in my last tutorial I had a lot of leads, I had a lot more leads, but for this one I didn't use too many leads, because again, if it's too much, it's too much, right? So I usually take the road of whatever is working and whatever sounds good and kind of completes it, right? And so I feel like 2 leads complete the melody, right? Don't feel like you need to add leads. I see a lot of pluggnb producers, but just producers in general, just feel like they need to add. Sometimes you need to know when to stop or when to take something away. Sometimes taking something away can open up the door for something else to shine. You see what I'm saying? And so that's kind of a concept when used in mixing and, you know, EQing and dynamics, but that's a whole another kind of conversation. But back to the main point, I only have 2 leads because I didn't feel like I needed to overdo it. So I'm gonna show you this first lead, and it's a lot, right? But it's okay because it's a synth lead, right? But I'll just play it for you. So I use the where is it? It's the chxnceNB from the lead synth category, and I renamed it. But if you notice, like I use this note a lot, right? Like even in my other music, again, I use that note a lot. Because I really like how it sounds with stuff, especially when you add like these right here. Like I really like that sound a lot, so I do that a lot in a lot of different songs, no matter what the chord progression is. So as far as making your leads and exactly what melodies to use and whatnot, right? As far as what I do, I just kind of sing it out, I'll hum it out, and I'll kind of have a melody in my head, right? And I'll play it out and I'll see if it sounds good. But as far as like any secret sauce, there is no secret sauce, right? The only thing I could probably tell you is I use notes like this a lot. Like this, that exact like pattern right there, I've used in definitely probably a lot of my songs, a lot of my remixes, right? But as far as all the other stuff, like, I mean, it's really just trying to click it around until you find something that sounds good. There is no really secret sauce on melodies. It's just kind of filling it out and kind of hearing what sounds good. So if we move on to the next one, this one is not as much. It's just very simple, and the preset I used was where is it? It's the simple pulse preset, and I went on there, increased the cutoff because it sounds harsh if you don't increase the cutoff. But yeah, so I'll just let you hear what it sounds like. So again, simple, but when combined with this, it really completes the melody, right? And again, I just want to say, like, don't feel like you have to overdo the leads or just add just to add, right? Add until you feel like this song is complete. And once the melody is complete, then you can move on, right, to the drums. And that's something that I've kind of carried with me, is that I don't overdo it. I never do too much. And if I feel like I'm doing too much, I'll bring it back. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, you're building a loop, right? Your melody is going to be played over and over again. So the goal is to make it to where I can listen to it, and your audience can listen to the song, the remix. They can listen to it over and over without getting bored, or without getting annoyed by certain sounds that are in the way, right? So, and then one thing I will say is the sound choice. I don't use harsh sounds too much. The harshest sound I'll ever use is probably an electric guitar, but I usually will decrease the highs to make it sound a little softer. But I use softer sounds. I use sounds that are not as harsh. I use smooth sounds, and that's mainly because that's what I like, but that's also with my style, right? My style, I make a lot of like really nice melodies and all that stuff. So when I have smooth sounds with those nice melodies, it kind of goes together, right? So I will play, that said, I'll play the melody and then all the leads together. And obviously it's a really beautiful melody. I really like this melody a lot. So next, let's go to the drums. So for these drums, and most of my drums, it's very simple. I don't use the 1/16 like the like I don't do that at all. And so of course, clap. And as far as the hat patterns, right? So I'll let you listen to the hat pattern. So when it comes to hats, I do not really do too much with the hats. Like I might occasionally use a 1/16 hat roll or 1/32 hat roll, but I usually just keep it 1/8 and keep it moving. I don't really do too much with that, but I will use more than one hat, as you can see, right? That's definitely two different hats. Sometimes I use a third one sometimes. And the reason is because it adds bounce, right? Sometimes switching up the sound will add like a little bit of a bounce where you're using drums, right? Sometimes you don't have to you don't have to do all that extra stuff. Like you don't have to do all the rolls and stuff. Like sometimes you don't even have to sometimes pitch it down. Like sometimes it just be a totally different sound will add some bounce to it, right? And then on top of that, I just added some chants. And so of course, when you combine it with the clap, and then of course I add another sound, another percussion. And another one. And then I added a snare. And then finally I added a little like a tom, like kind of like a drum hit. Like a little at the end. So when it comes to the drums, there's a couple things I'll say is that, again, there's no secret sauce, but a few things and tips I will say is that you want to keep it bouncy, right? The key, especially in my style, like I don't do too much of like drums going crazy. I usually like to keep it consistent and bouncy. That's why this is a 4-bar drum loop. Like I don't want to do too much. I just want to keep it consistent, right? So when you're listening to it, the listener is gonna just be like, they can get into a groove and they can rely on that groove. Like when you make drums, it's almost like make the drums as if the person listening to it is relying on that beat to be there. That beat, like, because when you shaking your head, you're bobbing your head, you know that beat is always gonna be there. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of a weird way to explain drums, and I know it might not make sense, but you want to really think about bounciness over excessive complexity, right? Because don't get me wrong, sometimes drums sound crazy when you have a lot going on, right? And it sounds good. But in my style, I usually like to keep it simple because the drums are really support for the melody. It's really support for the melody. It's not necessarily the main stage. But it's good to keep your drums bouncy and have a few switch ups, but don't do too much. Because again, the main star is really the melody, right? So with that said, I'll show you the melody with the drums. So it sounds really nice. It's really bouncy. It's kind of got that flow to it, got that beat. So last thing is the 808. So when you're making 808s, obviously just take the root notes, and like what 808 you use doesn't matter, but the 808 I use is the Throwboy number 4. It's in its pack, 808 number 4. That's the 808. It sounds like this. So you probably could find an 808 that sounds the exact same for free. And I think I have this in my sample kit, I'm pretty sure, because I use it all the time. But yeah, just take the root notes and use that. And then as far as the actual 808, like I'll let you hear it. Again, really simple. Like I don't do too much with the 808s. Like this note right here, this little, like I'll do that maybe once. And again, this is a 4-bar 808 loop. Like this is a short, like this is not too much at all. And it's really just for the sake of bounciness and consistency. Like the listener can always just know that this beat is gonna be here. So if I play with the drums, like straight up, like just bouncy, super bouncy, consistent. Like you can always rely on that beat to be there. Like it ain't gonna leave you in the middle of the song and switch up, right? Now, lastly, just to quickly go over it, is of course effects, right? And when you're using effects, it doesn't really matter what effects you use, but of course, these are the classic, those are classic effects right there, right? So, and then of course bells. I always use like this sound right here. Like I love that sound. Of course, everybody loves that sound, right? When you got like a real nice melody and you bring them bells in, right? It sounds really like majestic, like heavenly almost. Yeah, effects, use them however you want to use them. I usually keep it simple. I don't do too many effects. Of course, like you use a riser and then a crash when you're about to have the beat drop. But as far as transitions, bells, right? And then if you want to switch it up, you can use like one of these, like a descent, like a descension, or they call it a down lift, which makes no sense because when you lift something, it goes up. But sometimes some people call it a down lifter. So I hope y'all enjoyed this tutorial. That's pretty much how I make all my songs. That's kind of the process I go through, and it's kind of how I think about melodies. I think about drums, and I know it's probably, maybe you never heard of it before, maybe you have, I don't know. But yeah, I appreciate y'all for staying to the end. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been here. I love all of you, and more and more to come. I got a new remix coming out soon that's actually using this track. So, and if y'all didn't already notice, if y'all listen to my July clips that I posted on SoundCloud, this is actually previewed. This song is actually previewed at the end. I kind of left it there as an Easter egg, right? We building the lore over here, but but anyway, I just want to say I love y'all. Thank y'all so much for 1K. All right, man. I'm gonna finish this beat.
chxnceNB.